right, guys, welcome back to another edition of Texans Unfiltered, a Houston football podcast for your Houston Texans. I am young Ari Gold, aka James, and I am here with a friend of the show from 4 years ago when I was recording in my bedroom and all this other stuff. And now I actually have an office and stuff like that. But James Palmer from NFL Network, who has Houston ties, which I think people are forgetting now because you've been gone for so long.
I know. What a bummer, right? I mean, still
Yeah.
one of my favorite cities. My son was born there at Women's. And I'm kind of bummed I didn't get the Texans as my draft assignment. I'm a little peeved, but it was 2 great years, man. It was the end of Kubiak, start of Bill O'Brien. I was on that beat and still have come down a bunch for covering the team and whatnot. But yeah, man, you guys hold all the cards as you said when we were shooting the breeze before we started, man. It's going to be really interesting because the draft may be in Kansas City, but it kind of runs through Houston this year.
Yeah, it does. And for those that like follow your career, like, so you're going to be in Philly this week. What does your assignments look like now? Like, how does your year look? Because you're kind of all over the place every year. It seems like.
Yeah, I guess I cover the entire league for us. And I'd say there's some reporters we have that focus on a couple teams or a specific team or a handful of teams, and then I kind of bounce around everywhere, which is a lot of fun, honestly. I mean, obviously I've spent a lot of time with Mahomes and the Chiefs because I live in Denver, and that's a real quick flight for me and easy to get over there, and I know so many people in that building. But I've been with Philly a lot lately, and then, I mean, it's funny, like 2 years ago, I was with Cincinnati a bunch. It's really like just see who I'm covering like week 14 on. Because that's usually who's going to the Super Bowl for some reason. We start getting a sense of kind of how this thing's going to go, and we start getting a pretty good feel. I think everybody at NFL Network's pretty good at kind of figuring this stuff out, and I start hanging with these teams that are playoff teams as the year goes on, and we kind of during camp I try to get to a dozen camps. I get to Houston every year during training camp, so I'll be there, but I get to probably about 12 teams and then try to figure out kind of where we're at. We kind of feel through the first part of the season, and then we start going with who do we see start spending a lot of time. But it's weird. I cover everything. I mean, I was with Cleveland for like those 3 weeks when Deshaun was coming back. Yeah, and kind of covering that story. So if it's a big story in the league, I mean, I'm kind of there for us more often than not.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's got to be pretty cool. And now I guess we know that if we see you on the sidelines or we see you reporting from NRG week 14, 15, obviously maybe not this season, but maybe the couple seasons down the road, we'll know that they're headed towards the Lombardi possibly.
That's right, man. That's right. And that is something that like needs to be like, I think people, you could tell this better than me. I hope people in Houston know this. Like this is a multi-year process that they're in, and everybody in the building is well aware of that. They're not, in my opinion, when I talk to them, not hiding it from me about where this process is and the direction they think they're going. I think that is something that everybody needs to be cognizant. Doesn't mean you can't win sooner than later, obviously. But also at the same time, this is a process that takes time building a roster the right way. And I think and Nick kind of said this in his press conference, like him and D'Amico coming from organizations that have built rosters in slightly different ways, but have built winning rosters, specifically being deeper than other teams, I think takes a little while to do. And it really does start in the draft. And I'll say this, like most of the league thinks the Texans draft last year was really good. That was the consensus around the league, is that was a really good draft. And so you need to stack those. I mean, that's what Kansas City's doing right now, is stacking good drafts after you found your franchise quarterback. Finding your franchise quarterback, number one, or winning on a rookie deal are kind of the two ways that you can win in this league, is what everybody sees. And now you look at what Kansas City's had to do. They have just crushed it in hitting on draft picks the last couple of seasons once they paid Mahomes. You got to do that once you find the franchise guy, but you also got to do that to build your whole roster.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that that's how we open up the conversation, because I think a lot of people feel as if the rebuild's over. It's time now. And it's like, when you actually look at the roster, you look at just not only the roster, but what the team's been through over the last 2 years with the one and done coaches, and, spending the capital that we got back from Deshaun, right? That's another big piece. I think people just tend to leave out. They think like, oh, you had 2 first rounds last year, you have 2 this year, it's time to get going. But in actuality, like really, there's still so many parts of the process that need to be done before this team is ready. And the fans are clamoring. They're obviously they're dying for a quarterback. They want a quarterback so bad. I'm in the camp of, and I'm in a weird camp. I'm in a camp of, I want the best player on their board. I want to trust the process. We haven't had a reason to truly trust the process until now with D'Amico in the building. And I think really a lot of fans want the positivity and everything that came from D'Amico coming over to just stay. They don't want it to go away. And I think that's a fair thing to want. But I think also you got to understand that just because you want a quarterback, and this is something you've said, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, because you need a quarterback or want a quarterback doesn't mean you select a quarterback at 2. That's not the way the draft process works. These guys are scouted for years. It's not just last college season that the scouting process started for Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and CJ Stroud. This started 3-4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And if Bryce was their guy and they can't get Bryce and he goes to Carolina, which seems to be the consensus, if they're not in love with CJ or they're not in love with AR or Will, why would you force the pick at 2?
Well, I think it's the same reason why quarterbacks are always drafted higher than where they are on the board. Right. You reach for the quarterback because this is, if you don't have a quarterback, you can't compete. I forget who I was talking to the other day, what team they were with, but like, it's like the days of winning with a great defense and like, okay, offense, like, it just doesn't exist in the NFL anymore, specifically because of the rules, because of the advantages it has for the offense, the way these offenses put up points. It's just, you can't do it. I mean, it's funny that I use this analogy, but like in 2015 was probably the last time we really saw it when the Broncos won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. I know that sounds crazy, but it was one of the greatest defenses we've seen in recent memory. And Peyton Manning was not Peyton Manning. I mean, he had the foot issue. He had the neck issue that had finally kind of everything age had caught up with him. And he was a shell of himself in terms of throwing the football. Could he still read defenses brilliantly and call the right run play and play action? Certain spots were great, and hit Noah Daniels. There's a Houston legend, great dude, one of my guys, on some key plays. On that Super Bowl run, but like that type of format doesn't really exist in the NFL. So the point you bring up is like, so why do it? Well, because you can keep trying. I mean, there are certain teams that have the philosophy, I'm going to take a quarterback almost every season. Like literally, like if there's more guys in my building and I take more swings, there's a greater chance of somebody hitting. Like, where did D'Amico come from? I mean, you traded up all that. I mean, how many teams can trade up that much capital like they did to go get Trey Lance, and then your team is not really affected by it in terms of wins and losses with the loss of those draft picks, and you go undefeated with Mr. Irrelevant that you still picked, even though you had Trey Lance, even though you had Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, you keep trying to see what you can find. Now, I know most people are lying when they're like, well, I could see it in Brock Purdy. Like, no, you didn't. Like, nobody did. Right. Are there some traits? Yeah, like the way he carries himself and things like that. Yeah. But my point is, you just keep trying until one hits, because when one hits, that's everything. The guy who has really changed a lot of that, in my opinion, is Josh Allen. Like, Josh Allen has changed that dramatically 100%. Because of what he was in college at Wyoming. Let's be honest, I used to cover Wyoming for a living. It is not SEC, Big Ten, really anything type talent. And he was like a 53% completion percentage and couldn't. I mean, John Elway didn't even go to his pro day, and it was a drive up, I-25. And they were picking in the top 10 that year. And since he's been able to turn it around, because they went on talent like that he had, a rocket arm and unbelievable athletic ability, the work he put in, everything that happened, he became, one of the best quarterbacks in football. That's what everybody's going. Well, maybe he can become Josh Allen. Isn't that what we're hearing with Levis? And that's what we're hearing with Anthony Richardson, right? Yeah. Like, he can make. Well, the reason we bring up Josh is because he's not the norm. Like, a lot of credit should go to him. Most of it could. I've talked to Brandon Beane about it in the past. Like, but a lot of it should go to Ken Dorsey and Brian Daboll and the staff. But a lot should go to Josh for the way he worked. Does that work out repeatedly? I don't know. But that's why people keep reaching, and that's why people keep drafting quarterbacks higher than they actually have them on their board. I mean, let's be honest. We're going to have 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10. Do you think everybody has on their board, literally their top 100 prospects, do you think all 4 of those quarterbacks are in their top 10 best players?
Absolutely not. Positional value plays a part.
Exactly. So that's why, to the original point, in the original question, why do you do it? Because it could still possibly hit if there's some questions, and it's the most important position in sports. So you try it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that sentiment 100%. I do agree. I just don't think that you have to, just because you're at 2, you have to take a quarterback at 2.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You
I
have
agree with that.
12, you have 33, you have players that people aren't talking about, like Clayton Tune. You have the quarterback from Fresno State that's, if you look at the throw chart, he's out of this world. You have DTR out of UCLA. Like, there are Hendon Hooker, who is going to be a first round pick no matter what people say. He's going to go in the first round. I guess, like, that, when I say force a pick, that's what I mean. Like, you need a quarterback, go grab a quarterback. But if you feel like a Will Anderson or a Tyree Wilson is going to be that piece, and you can grab the quarterback at 12, well, then the best thing you can do from a team building perspective is grab that cornerstone on the defense while also taking that quarterback at 12.
Yeah, I mean, and if everything falls your way, that would be great, right? And I do think, and you brought up a good point where, like, that cornerstone of your defense, or what you're trying to build, like with those things you're saying, like, to me, and we can debate this, and it'd be fun. Like,
Sure,
my understanding is I think Tyree Wilson is, the Texans like him more than they like Will Anderson.
makes sense.
And that's kind of from what I'm hearing, and that's what other teams think as well with the Texans. But also, I would look at it from a couple different angles. I would also go, like, all right, if I'm D'Amico Ryans and I'm building this new culture in Houston, and I'm building my locker room, I don't know if there's a better human being to pick than Will Anderson. Like,
Right.
The reports I get from teams when I talk to them are like, this is literally like a generational human being that also is very, very good at football and getting after the quarterback. One team put it to me, actually talking to them yesterday, we're like, it would essentially be D'Amico drafting D'Amico. Like, that's how good of a leader he is in the locker room. The same team said, you may never have to walk into a defensive meeting again. Like, that's
Wow.
how much he would lead. That's how much he would, if you have an issue, he would take care of it. And if you're looking in your first year to establish a culture, I would think all of that would be very highly valued in trying to establish this new culture that D'Amico Ryans is trying to do, in somebody that is just that dominant of a leader, that motivated, that ability to motivate those around them. All of those things I think are extremely important. Now, I have heard from plenty of teams, like, Will Anderson just doesn't have that wow athletic ability factor that Tyree Wilson does. Like, Tyree Wilson has that rare body, like as one team put it to me, like a Bosa body, like, that just don't come around very often. Those type of human beings that are not walking the planet. That's what he has. And if you want an elite pass rusher, he might fit what the Texans do defensively a little bit better, and the traits might be higher. And Will has a little bit of that Alabama in him, which we all know D'Amico knows Alabama inside and out, but, like, he has a little bit of, like, I think he's been coached really well, and he's great at his craft, and he's a hard worker. Like, he's gotten a lot out of himself. How much higher is the ceiling than what this dominant player we're seeing? How much higher is the ceiling we're seeing for Tyree Wilson? Might be actually higher, but you need cornerstone pass rushers, and that's why I kind of on that little tangent about Will Anderson, because, like, if you're looking for cornerstone players to your franchise and you're not taking a quarterback, to me, that type of player is what you go with number 2.
And I also think, like, and this is a piece that people tend to leave out when they're talking about this defense, a very significant investment last year by Nick Caserio and Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie. So we're talking about the back end secondary. Well, me too. And Stingley, while Sauce looks to be the pick right now, and everybody's going to talk about it, and Sauce looks like he may have been a better corner, Stingley did put on some good film against Denver. Sauce got pretty grabby. I'm surprised he got away with a lot of things he got away with. But when you look at Stingley and you watch him against Sutton and a couple other games this last season, what's the best way to complement that good secondary that you're building? Well, add a pass rusher to give them the ability to actually be able to cover a little bit, not have to cover for so long. So I think there's so many different ways to go about it.
I agree with you. And also, I'll say this will make Texans fans feel a little better. Almost every team I've talked to, they do not believe there is a corner in this draft that is on the level of Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley. Like, even Witherspoon or the kid from
Gonzalez.
Oregon, like, they are not at the level of those two. And I do think, obviously, when the other guy wins Defensive Rookie of the Year,
Right.
It makes you go, did we go with the wrong guy? But I think you got to remember, like, they kind of shut him down at the end of the year, right?
Yep.
The system was not, I don't think, fitting his strengths by any means. I think he's a really, really good player. I think you're going to see an even better Derek Stingley this year. I also think for both of those guys, I think the world of the move to go get Jimmy Ward. I think
Yep.
not just because of position versatility on the back end that he can provide you, and knowledge of the system is probably a greater strength of the two. Like, I think Jalen Petrie is a great player. I think playing and having an entire offseason in camp before the season starts with Jimmy Ward is going to do wonders to him and to somebody like Stingley. Like, I think that type of ability paired with that type of understanding of D'Amico's system, I think makes both those guys better right off the bat. So that was my little, like, I want people to feel better. There's no corner in this draft that is better than Derek Stingley.
That's great. That is needed because it's been the hottest debate over the last couple weeks. And I also think you're right. Like when you look at the scheme, the Tampa 2 scheme, the cover 2 scheme that Lovey ran, 90% zone. Stingley played 90% man in college, really didn't understand zone coverages and assignments and how to really, he had to develop in that area, right? So now add in a fact that you might have had the second worst pass rush defense in the league. And you're going to have to play zone instead of lining up and playing press man. Now he's going to be in a system where it's going to be an aggressive. It fits his play style. He's a very aggressive corner. And he can play his way. He can play the way he needs to. So, double down on that a little bit with, Will Anderson or Tyrese Wilson. But with the quarterbacks, I'd love to know, and I know you're on NFL Network all the time. You're always asked the questions, but I don't feel like anybody ever asks you the questions. Who are your quarterbacks? If you were to rank them right now, how would you rank this quarterback class?
All right. I'd probably say Bryce ahead of CJ, and then there's a gap. And then I'd probably say with the next two, it's hard for me to I would probably put Levis ahead of Anthony Richardson. But the ceiling for Anthony Richardson and the potential is just unreal. But that's me going back to what I was saying about Josh Allen, right? Like, are we going to rank a guy higher just because there's a chance he can get to, here? Well, the other guys can't get to that no matter what. So you're banking on the chance of getting there. But I think the floor is much lower on both those guys than the other two. I think the floor is very high for CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. I just don't see them really failing. Now, obviously, quarterback is fit and system, and a lot of that is at play. I think the floor for the other two, though, is much, much lower. With Hendon Hooker, I don't know where to put him with Levis and Anthony Richardson because he's going to be like 26.
Yeah.
He's coming off the ACL. He didn't really play a system that, he reads half the field in that Baylor air raid type of form and didn't really and nobody does that in the NFL. But at the same time, we didn't see Anthony Richardson do anything really NFL-like. But at the same time, there's traits that are through the roof. So I just think I would slide just, if I'm running an organization, it'd be Bryce, CJ, Gap, Levis, Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker, probably is how I would go with it. There's just some traits with Levis and Anthony Richardson where I don't know if they'll be fixed. And that's what teams are always trying to figure out. First off, coaches are arrogant and they're going to say, well, if I get him, I'll fix it. Right. Which definitely happens. But can you teach Will Levis on a 5-yard out, or crossing pattern, or in the flat, put some touch on the ball, man. Don't knock the guy over.
Right.
Can that be fixed? I don't know. With Anthony Richardson, I think he needs time, obviously, like everybody thinks. But there's traits that are just out of this world. Levis actually has some of those too. But I guess the point is, can you fix some of them? It's all about what your staff and the fit. And we could talk about this part forever. I am so big on fit and environment and the situation you land in as a player out of the draft. I think it is so undervalued in just the perception of probably a casual fan. It is so huge where you land, from the city, from the building, from the coaches, from the position coaches that you have, talking non-quarterback too. Fits everything. And I think with these quarterbacks specifically, fit is going to be huge.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the fit is one of those pieces that seems to be left out a lot. It's very rare that you have a situation where Zach Wilson was just the wrong pick
Yep.
because he was in the right fit. He was in the right scheme. He was in the right coaching. Like he had everything that you need to succeed. And then for every Zach Wilson, there's 20 forced quarterbacks in a organization where it's not going to work, and it's not a scheme fit. There's not the supporting of the coaching staff and the developmental traits that are needed for them to be able to succeed. I actually have Anthony Richardson as my number one quarterback. I actually think I like Bryce. I think Bryce is a super talented quarterback. When it comes to the mind of a quarterback, I don't know if you'll get a better quarterback than Bryce. I think when it comes to Anthony Richardson, when you take in what he had to go through at Florida, I don't think he's raw. I think he's inexperienced. I think he had 129th ranked in drops out of 135 teams. His adjusted completion percentage rating would be actually 66%. All of his entire offense is going to be UDFAs. The coaching scheme was not very friendly to him either. And he's really not this runner that people try to make him out to be. If you watch him, he's always keeping his eyes downfield. But the mental aspect is the part. And I had Matt Waldman on last week, and we talked about this. And he's so good at that stuff.
Yeah.
But the charting and the nerdiness that comes with that part. So being able to manipulate a safety and a linebacker in college is not something you see a lot of. But Matt saw it a ton on tape. And so when you combine those two aspects, it's like, he is inexperienced, but is he inexperienced enough to where everything that you see on film is not enough to be able to believe that he can get to that next level? And when I think about the AFC, I think you have to have a guy who could potentially be top 5. He's the only quarterback I see could be top 5, because if you're playing in January, you're going against Herbert, you're going against Mahomes, you're going against Jackson, you're going against Lawrence. The list goes on.
You didn't even mention Joe Burrow.
And I didn't even mention Joe Burrow. See what I mean? Like it just goes on. And if you want to be able to hang with him in January, you have to have a guy. I don't think anybody outside of him has the chance to actually be that type of quarterback.
So you're looking at long play. Yeah. And honestly, like you're mentioning in January, like that's a different type of situation you're in as a quarterback. That defensive coordinators are at another level come playoff time. And what you're doing from the quarterback spot is going to have to be just special. And you're right. And I think, like, I get what you're saying. And that's why I said guys always go higher than what you think, because the chance of him is there. I don't think the chance of like some other guys can get to that level. Like, I mean, the guy's like physically like a Greek god.
Yeah.
There
He's like
are
Thor
enough
playing quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he should be an edge rusher. I don't know. It's talented enough. It's unbelievable. Physically, the league. I'll be honest, is pretty split on it. Like there are definitely people I have talked to that are like, I don't see it. I don't see it translating. I think he is an unbelievable athlete. I think he'll be able to do some things. I don't see it being successful. You could call some of those people traditional, like drop back quarterback, but I do think the position has changed. Positions played differently. Now that's the hard part that you're going to try to evaluate, right? Like when you say, like, I think he can get to that level, right? I look at like the situation that's going on in Baltimore with Lamar, and it's like, he's one of the most dynamic players in all of football. He's an MVP. Like, how long can that playing style last, though? There's plenty of people in the league that are like, this style, the way he plays, is 3 years, 3 more years, 4 more years is what they think.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case, but if he's going to have to sit back there and just rely on his arm, and the legs are not what we're seeing, like from a quarterback, which we've really never seen really maybe ever. Now, did he learn enough during that period of time to get into that group when trait X is not as dynamic as it used to be? And I think you're already seeing it. I was talking to a team about this the other day. Like, I think you're already seeing it with Mahomes. I think Josh Allen's openly talking about it in his press conferences. Like, I can't play like this anymore. I think you've seen Pat already change what he does. Now, he's on another planet
100%.
from everybody else. Burrow's the only close person to him. I think you have to weigh all of that into, how you're going to evaluate these guys and how successful they're going to be and how many games are you going to win with them. Like, there was an interesting debate on Bucky Brooks and Darren Jeremiah were having this on their podcast. Like, what if the Bears at 9 go Anthony Richardson?
Yeah.
And they just go like, we're just going to get younger at the quarterback position. We're going to kind of do the same thing. We're going to get younger and try to build talent everywhere else with a rookie contract. So that's kind of like the fight everybody's in, is the fight against time, against dollars.
Yeah. And I mean, he's also 20, which is very interesting to think about,
sure.
God, to be 20 and look like that and have that mind, like insane. You mentioned, with Hendon Hooker, you mentioned the air raid offense, and that not being something that is, a lot of NFL GMs and executives, they've never really been a big fan of that. And it's interesting that Patrick Mahomes came from that offense, and that was his biggest knock. Do you think that Patrick Mahomes has changed maybe the way that those type of college offenses are being viewed with GMs and executives, that, hey, you know what, if they got the mental part down and they got the physical traits, maybe we can make this work? But then again, none of them are Andy Reid.
That's a good point. And listen, remember, people didn't love that pick when it happened, and there was other guys taken before him. I think that's probably a little bit of a sense, because you want to see, okay, a guy came out of it and did it. The league loves comps, right?
Yeah.
Like, can I go back and say somebody did this? They don't like outliers. I mean, that's why a lot of teams don't like Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, you can't comp him to anybody,
right?
Because he just plays the position and is built differently than most guys you see. And so there isn't a comp. Some coaches love that there's no comp for him, because there's like, wow, watch me go use this guy in a wide variety of ways, because there's no real comp to him. I think with Hendon, like, that's why the visits are so important. Like, for him, visits were huge, obviously, for the medical side. So you can get your doctors on him and you can see the ACL and you can see how he's medically. But if you get privately talking ball with him, I mean, you might find out, like, oh, this is just the offense he played in. Like, this isn't the only thing he can do, right? Yeah. So that's why, like, getting them alone and talking ball and getting them on the board during these visits, which is all things he can do, right? Doesn't matter if he can't work out for you. He can sit up on the board all day and show you what he can do. If he hasn't done it in college, doesn't mean he can't do it. I think that is, you're right, something that does need to be clarified. But the league loves to know, like, did you do it? And how quickly can I get you up to speed to do what I want you to do? Because you're already going to be 26. So I don't have time to wait with you. That's why the 20 years old with Anthony Richardson is great. I got time with you, man. Like, let's figure this out. Now, there is a weird debate in the league with AR about, some people believe you could play him right away and he might learn better by playing. Pat did that his second year when he played. Now, obviously, he sat the first year behind Alex Smith, but he'd even admit, like, I was just going out there and just playing backyard football a little bit my rookie year. We won MVP, which is insane. But, like, he didn't see things the way he does now. He learned it on the fly really, really well. Some people think Anthony Richardson would actually be better off learning it by doing it as opposed to just watching.
And I think it's fair. It's especially with all this S2 stuff. Lots of interesting data is being added, even though it's been used for 7 years. It's, getting an understanding of how these guys' brain works, how they process. Those things are very telling. The Texans don't subscribe to it, but it's still interesting. So,
yeah, there weren't a lot of teams doing it, by the way. Like, there's only 6 teams that used the S2 a year ago.
Yeah, I took it 3 weeks ago, and
you took the test?
Yeah. And
nice.
From what I understand, if I was in this draft, I would be the number 1 overall pick based on my impulse reaction being at an elite score. Everything else was below average or basic, but impulse reactions were right there. So
love it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
All right, so talking about this team, last thing about the Texans, and then I'd love to get your picks. There's a lot of, obviously 2 weeks ago, there was a ton of talk about Nick Cassera. Is he leaving? There's going to be a power struggle. Obviously, it seems like that was all, no offense, media created, which, sometimes that happens. One person says something, and it's not even media created, but it's more fan created. Media says something, soundbite gets taken, it's turned into what was not said. He has a press conference. He's staying. He's here. I believe that makes the most sense. With the owners, though, we're seeing a lot more Hannah McNair. we're seeing her more now. Drew just released a video today about Nick Caserio, and Hannah's in every video, Cal's in every video. Is there any sense in the building, James, that you believe that the owners are going to make this pick at 2 and it's not going to be Nick Caserio and D'Amico?
Well, I'll tell you this. In every building, almost every building, the owner has the final say. Like, the owner can come down and say, we're taking a quarterback. Take the quarterback you want, but we're taking a quarterback at 2. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility, in all honesty, of ownership saying that. Like, it's not. And I'm not saying that the McNairs will do that. I think they have a lot of trust in both of these guys together. I think the building is in the best spot it's been in a long time. But it doesn't mean the owner, I mean, you write the checks. You got the final say. And that's not a Texans exclusive thing. That's every building in the league. Like, Shad Khan down in Jacksonville is the one who had multiple options of really established head coaches to come in, and he picks Urban Meyer probably against any advice he was getting from anybody else in the building. Like, owners have the say to do what they'd like with the pick. They'll come down and tell you. Now, it's up to the GM and up to the head coach. I mean, I know coaches and GMs that have defied the owner, and it's either got them angry and everybody gets over it, or they lose their job. Like, it's happened. With Nick, I would say this, like, I don't think it's all media driven. I really don't. I think we have to remember the process that happens because of the importance of the cohesion between head coach and general manager. I think that's obviously what everybody's striving for, right? Everybody's looking for a John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, right? Like, everybody's looking for that type of relationship, that type of cohesion between head coach and GM. I think anybody is going to want as much power as possible within reason. Everybody's going to not want to lose any power. Everybody's going to want to have a say in the room. And when D'Amico comes in, and I'm not saying this exactly happened, but I could see maybe somebody doesn't like the setup. But I think you can also get over that pretty easily too.
Yeah.
Like, anybody can be upset. And again, this is just creating a fake scenario. Like, say Nick is like not happy, tells some people that he's pissed that D'Amico has blank, blank, blank say or something like that. And then, like, honestly, like in a week or two, Nick's over it. Like, that still could get out that he wasn't happy, right? And I think finding the working relationship between two parties is extremely important, specifically the head coach and general manager. That's how your organization works. From everything I understand, they have a pretty good relationship. I think they see football very similarly. I think that's important for that. But again, to the ownership, I think they're going to let them make the pick, but at the same time, that's just my opinion. I think that's a smart thing to do. But at the same time, you're the one that is watching empty seats as an owner. And if you think the fan base is upset and whatnot, you can make a call if you want.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've seen, and there's only, as fans or, bloggers, whatever I would be considered, there's this like sense of like, there are some owners who are the type of owners that are going to go in and say, hey, at 2, this is what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then there are some like Kansas City where it's like, I trust Veach and Andy, and I trust that they have enough of a resume to know I don't need to tell them what to do. Right. Yep. And same with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. So I guess that's what I wonder is like, we don't know really. We don't know enough that's the about thing, you Cal don't and know. Hannah.
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, you're looking at Clark Hunt that's been running that team for a while now. I think there's a vibe on how Clark runs things. This is new ownership. Like you're learning, I think, about Cal and Hannah we're learning on the fly. We're learning as it happens. Like, they have not been acting owners for an extended period of time. So let's see how it goes. Let's see how the building operates. I think there are some owners, you know how they operate. And you know how you're right. There are two schools of thoughts. There's ones that are very hands-on. There's ones that are, I hired the right people to make the right decisions. And I think it varies by building, but again, I do think that varies. I don't want to just quote myself from earlier, but I do think they have the final say.
Yeah, and I don't make clips. I just throw the videos up, and this is my creative outlet. So this will not be on Twitter, so don't worry. There will be no chance for that to happen.
Oh, perfect.
All right, last one before we go. 2-12. What do you think happens? I think they go defensive end. I think they trade back from 12. I think there's a good chance that maybe they trade 2 and get a haul. People are saying that this draft class is not the best draft class. One GM came out today and said he doesn't have 15 players with a first round grade. What do you think the Texans do at 2-12, James?
If I think they're open for business at 2, because I think we've all just gotten the sense that they're not going to go CJ Stroud. I think we're all just kind of sensing that with everything of the information that we're all kind of gathering. Now, again, that could change by Thursday, but I just don't see it happening. So I think if they stay at 2, I think they'd like to try to go back. I think if they stay at 2, they are going to go edge rusher. I think Tyree Wilson probably, if we're going to look at a guy that's a dynamic player and has very rare traits to be a really great player, I'll go with him at 2. And at 12, that's going to be tough because I tweeted this out, I think today, and I think a couple people picked it up. Like, I've talked to enough teams that are like, nobody has any clue what's going to happen in the top 10. Like, really, because there are not a lot of blue chippers. Like, if last year we had a really good sense before the draft happened, like how the top 10 was going to pretty much go.
Yep.
I think we all kind of had an idea. This, we don't know, because if you, like, here's a perfect example. I will get to 12. But as a perfect example, like 2 of the most talented players, like literally just talented players, have a lot of questions. Bijan Robinson and Jalen Carter. Obviously very different questions about them. But where they go, we don't know, because teams don't value running backs anymore. So Bijan's like considered one of the 3 best, if not 2 best players in this draft. Just straight up players. Probably the cleanest prospect too, as a person on and off the field. But his position is just not valued. So where does he go? Like, Jalen Carter, maybe the most talented football player in this draft, talent-wise. But with everything off the field, the teams are gathering, we don't know where he's going to go. So, like, when you have surefire talent but still questions, like, we don't know how the top 10 is going to shake out. Like, and I think with most teams I've talked to, 4 quarterbacks go in the top 10. Like, that's been pretty consistent.
Only happened in 2018. It's the only time 4 have gone in the top 10.
Yeah, I think there's just some starvation up there, player wise. Everybody's curious on how far when the corners start going. And again, and this is a draft where you have like pretty much like 1 pure tackle that's a top 10, top 15 player. Because Skoronski's not, nobody really thinks he's a tackle. And so you're not going to take a guard that high. They could go Jackson Smith and Jigba, and at 12, it's really him. Honestly, there are plenty of teams that think he's the only first round receiver, grade wise. It doesn't mean he's the only receiver going in the first round by any means. Sure. It's just, this is not a wow receiver draft class. There really isn't. Most teams I've talked to, there isn't a 1 in this draft. There is not a number 1 receiver, maybe not in this entire draft. A lot of really talented players that can really impact your offense, really valuable pieces. I think Jackson could definitely be that. I think they need, listen, go get another receiver if you're going to go into the season with Davis Mills and Case Keenum, I guess. You're going to need all the weapons you can handle, and for whoever, you're going to be, quarterback of the future at some point. But I don't think that's a terrible play either at 12. To go there, but my point is, like, there's so many different things can fall to them. They might have their choice of, I'm trying to think, like, of the way it could fall. They could have like one of their higher guys on their board still available there at 12, just because of the way the quarterbacks go.
And it could be a quarterback even.
It could be a quarterback at 12, honestly.
I do feel like with the way this draft class is being talked about, I think the reason why the starvation for quarterbacks is there is because of the class not being this elite class that we had last year.
And the class wasn't very good last year.
Right.
That's kind of why you're seeing this, because this class is better than last year's class. If you remember last year when we were getting into the draft talk, like, people were like, Malik Willis might go in the first round. Like, I don't even know if the Titans really even think Malik Willis is much of a player now, and they took him in what was it, the fourth?
Yes.
So you just got to remember how this stuff goes leading into the draft and how important that position is, man. It's wild.
I said last one, and I'm so sorry. You could do this real quick.
Right,
Is there any truth to this Minnesota moving up to take a quarterback potentially at 2? Like that they've had talks with the Texans?
That's a long ways to go.
It is.
I don't know what
it would
the
have to be
capital they
3-1,
have to
right?
give up. Which, how wild is it? Like all this turnover and change in Minnesota after they won the division a year ago,
Right.
and it's like everything's like changing there. They're in the mix. I mean, there's teams that definitely think there are some teams that are like I think Seattle that I've talked to this weekend. I think Seattle's taking a quarterback at 5. That is a thought around the league. Like just because they're not going to be up here again. And Geno Smith's deal is very friendly to the team. They could get Anthony Richardson at 5 and sit him. And I think Geno would be great for whoever sat behind him. I think there's truth to definitely teams poking around. I think Tennessee's definitely one of them looking to come up at 11. I think that's definitely a team that has done a ton of work on quarterbacks. And I know there's teams in the top 10 looking to get back just because of what you and I just talked about. Like, there's not dominant blue chippers like falling all to you at 10.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I know you got a busy couple days ahead of you. Enjoy your time in Philly. James
Appreciate
Palmer, thank you for coming on the show. You guys can follow James at James Palmer TV on Twitter. Obviously, if you just turn on NFL Network, his face is right there at all times.
It's going to be there soon, actually. I think I'm on path to the draft in like 45 minutes.
Pat McAfee always gives Ian a hard time. He says, are you wearing pants today? Is that a thing? And like sometimes it's pajama pants. We've seen Ian do the pajama pants with the tie.
Oh, yeah. Ian barely leaves that bunker at his house ever. He is. I mean, listen, he never leaves that thing. He doesn't travel really. I mean, he's traveling this week. He's in Kansas City right now. But yeah, Ian's down there in that bunker. I'm usually a sweatpants guy because I usually try to get a workout in right after I'm done TV. But I actually have jeans on. I had an early workout today, so I'm like a real human being today. This is nice.
Jeez. Well, we're
very
fancy
me today.
Thank you for wearing pants. We appreciate it. James Palmer, thank you so much. We'll definitely talk soon.
Yeah, appreciate it. Let's not make it 4 years this time.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Cool.